Hello, my name is Hannah Lisowski, and I'm in Biology 314, Microbiology with Dr. Glick. For this presentation, I'm going to talk about how viruses spread, different types of viruses, how you could avoid contracting the viruses, and just the overall view of viruses. So to begin, I'm going to talk about what a virus is. So it is an infectious agent that consists of genetic material and proteins that replicate itself within a host cell. And when it is in the host cell, it creates copies that is then transmitted to others. So the proteins get inside the healthy cell, copy itself, and then the body will finally realize it's infected. Now, there are many different types of viruses. Some include hepatitis C, influenza, SARS-CoV-2, measles, mumps, etc. There are many different types. So to the right, we see a typical depiction of what a virus looks like, and there seem to be little spikes coming off of them. So I thought it was appropriate to include a cartoon picture of SARS-CoV-2 because the proteins that are in SARS-CoV-2 are actually known as spike proteins, and so that are the spikes coming off of the virus. It is the proteins. Transmission of viruses. So viruses can be spread in many different ways. Respiratory transmission includes the virus being spread by breathing, sneezing, talking, or coughing of someone. The droplets that come from spit or mucus can travel through the air and be passed to the nose or mouth of another person. The bottom picture depicts where social distancing comes into. So the droplets are heavier than air, so the gravity pulls the droplets that contain the virus to the ground immediately. So, for example, within COVID-19, we have been advised for social distancing of 6 feet. And this is because the virus is less likely to be transmitted if you are 6 feet away from someone. The other type of transmission is contact transmission. Viruses do have the ability to linger on surfaces. If someone touches the surface and then touches their nose, mouth, or eyes, it can be transmitted. Some viruses can only survive on surfaces for a few hours, but other ones can survive on surfaces for days. Within contact transmission and COVID-19, in the beginning of the pandemic, when not a lot of information about the virus has been released, we were advised to Clorox everything and wipe down everything we've talked. And this is a good habit because it does get rid of some germs. But as we'll learn later in the slideshow, SARS-CoV-2 is more through respiratory transmission. Influenza. So the first virus I'll talk about is influenza. It has 4 virus types: influenza A, influenza B, influenza C, and influenza D. Influenza A and B are the cause of flu season, the common flu we see every single year, as to why we get the flu shot. Influenza A is the cause of the influenza pandemic that occurred many years ago. The flu mainly spreads by respiratory transmission, and it rarely spreads by contact transmission. The flu is commonly mistaken for the cold, as you can see in this right picture. Flu symptoms are more severe than cold symptoms, so it has more severe coughing, a more severe sore throat, more severe respiratory infections. Flu symptoms can also begin 2 days after the virus is contracted, so the flu can be passed on to someone else before you even know you are sick. Within SARS-CoV-2, this is the same case. So this is why we have quarantining. You have to quarantine or isolate for 14 days because you can be asymptomatic and still have the virus. SARS-CoV-2 spreads more rapidly through respiratory transmission, and Omicron is a variant of concern. The 2 main variants of SARS-CoV-2 virus that we have been dealing with is Omicron and Delta. Omicron is more of a concern than Delta because it is so much more transmissible through respiratory transmission. Now, there are different strains of the coronavirus. So the one that I mentioned and the one that we have been dealing with since the beginning of 2020 is SARS-CoV-2. It has a 1 to 7.2% fatality rate, and it originated in Wuhan, China. There are more than 2 million cases in the United States today. A strain of the coronavirus that occurred a couple years ago is MERS-CoV. It has a 34.4% fatality rate, and it originated in Arabian Peninsula. There are only 2 cases in the United States that are known, and this is because of the higher fatality rate. So if someone contracted MERS COVID, they were less likely to transmit it to another person because they most likely died from it too quick in order to transmit it to another person. The original strain of the coronavirus is SARS-CoV. It has a 9.6 fatality rate, and it also originated in China along with SARS-CoV-2. There are only 27 cases known in the United States. How to prevent the spread. So viruses can be stopped. They can be prevented, they can be stopped. Our lungs have cells that line them in order to get rid of the bacteria and viruses, but we must take additional precaution in order to avoid obtaining a virus. We are advised to wash our hands for at least 20 seconds to get rid of any germs of the virus that we contain on our hands. We are advised to avoid touching our face because if we do have the virus on our hands, then if we touch our face, it could be transmitted to our eyes, mouth, or nose. As I stated earlier, especially in the pandemic that we're in now, we were advised to practice social distancing because droplets are heavier than air, so the gravity pulls them to the ground immediately. If we are farther away from someone, then it is less likely we will transmit the virus. And this is especially important in COVID-19, along with wearing a mask, because COVID-19 and SARS-CoV-2 is so transmissible. We practice social distancing and wear a mask to reduce the risk of obtaining the virus. And in addition, we've also received recommended vaccinations. We've received flu shots, shots for shingles in the past, chickenpox, measles, mumps, and the vaccinations create the antibodies to be into our system to fight the virus off if we do contract it. And that is all I have on viruses. Thank you.